Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. There's been a lot of new features and one of them are changes to auto layout. I'll link in the description below the website link to Figma's auto layout page where you can read up on the features. So rather than explain the features again, which you've probably seen before, I want to show you how we can use these features to create something tangible like a chatbot. Let's jump into it. So this is the design we're going for today. It's a simple chatbot design. We have this header segment, which we can use to write the chatbot name and even have a button to minimize the chatbot. On the bottom, we have a section to type a message and hit the send button. And in the middle, we have three key components. So in white, we have the message bubble, which is sent by the chatbot. We have these blue pills, which are prompts for the user to enter. And then we have styled in this dark gray, the messages sent by the user. If you want to follow along, here are the components I'll be using in this exercise. We have these three key components that I outlined before. We need these spaces, which helps us to space the middle section. If you don't know what spaces are, I've created a spaces video, which I can link in the description below. We need these two icons, so one for minimize and one for send. Here are the four colors I'll be using. So I'm just going to highlight these and then we can see them in the selection colors. So these are the hex codes for the colors I'll be using in this exercise. And we'll be using three types of text sizes. So we have one for the chat, subtext, and the name, which are using the typeface Helvetica New, light, bold. This is the font size, and then we have the line height size, which is default 20. So following best practice, the first thing I probably want to do is create some styles. So with my colors, I'm just going to go ahead and with these four dots here, I can go add my styles. So I'm going to call this one white. I'll use black. And you might wonder why this is not true black. We try not to use true black in our designs because it's a bit too harsh. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the text. So it's already on the right typeface, light, and I'm going to make this one 14. And then this one, I'll make it bold, 18. And I'm going to go ahead and write bold, subtext, regular text. Okay, let's get designing. So to start our design, we're going to build our chatbot structure. And there are multiple ways we can do this, but we're just going to do it from outside in. So I'm going to build the outside frame. So the overall frame, I'm just going to hit F for frame, which is also this button here. And this will be the size of our chatbot. So let's say we want it to be 390 in width and the height, we're just going to do 900. And I'm just going to zoom into that. So the reason why we choose 390 is if I hit this frame button, which resizes the frame, we can see that the general iPhone 13 size is 390, and usually chatbots are modeled after the mobile design resolution so that if you were to open it on your mobile, it also works. So we'll just stick with this for now. And we're just going to hit the auto layout feature, which is this plus icon here. You can also go right click, add auto layout or shift A. So I'm just going to press the plus here. And you can see we've got these new features. I've explained auto layout before, so I'll go through it really quickly, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll answer them when I have time. But what we want to do is we have this outside frame and we just want to make sure it's fixed. So the difference between fixed and hug is hug follows the elements within, which currently there's nothing, but we want it to always stay with the size that we've set here. So 390 and 900. So now we're going to go ahead and create three more frames. So one for the header. To quick copy, you can hold down Option and just click and drag. You can hold Shift to constrain the copy. So we have one that will be gray, and then the header and footer, which will be white. So for this purpose, let's just hide this fill so it doesn't distract us. I'm gonna hide it, but we can see it's still there. Or actually, let's just make it an odd color to make sure we're doing it correctly. So we're gonna drag these three elements in. And there we have it. So with order layout, there are two key things that we gotta note. Order layout does two things. It controls the spacing between elements, which is this one over here. So it says vertical gap between items, so that's 8. And then it creates a padding around elements, which is 8. So you can see on the left here, I'm going to click on this one and hold the options key. You can kind of see the padding from the left and the top is 8. And the right and the bottom is this random number. So the reason why it's random is because we've kind of overrid the frame to be fixed. So if we hugged it, it will just follow that 8. Let me just go and do. But also it's following this top left-hand corner because the order layout is following the top left, which we had here. I'll just explain some other things quite briefly, but this controls the direction of the layout. So the vertical layout is obviously top to bottom. We can go left to right, which we can't see, but they are there. So let's just unclip it so we can see. So they're there. And the wrap just means it wants to go from left to right, like this horizontal one. But if it goes outside of the bounding box, it will just start a new row, which is quite handy. So in this instance, we're going to go down. And we want to actually remove all of this padding. And we also want to remove the spacing. So for the top one, we don't really know what the size is for the height. So we'll just leave it as 74 fixed. But I want to make sure that this element follows the outside frame. So instead of fixed here, I can just press fill. Same with this one. I don't know what the height needs to be, but I'm just going to press fill. And then for the middle section, I just want it to take up the rest. So I'm just going to go fill and fill. So there we have our frame. We can go ahead and remove the outside frame's fill, which does nothing. So some other tweaks we want to make is we want to make sure it has rounded corners. And you can't see the rounded corners yet. Let me just go over here because we have the clip content off. So make sure we click it back on. And then we might want to add some shadows. So let me just add the drop shadows. I like it to have it in the middle. So X and Y, I'll keep it at 0. And it's quite small. So usually I have it at 8 and I'll just dial it a bit lower. So 10%. So here is our structure. So now we're going to go ahead and fix our header. I'm going to go here and press T for text and type in Chatbot. So it's center aligned and I'm going to go ahead and add my style, which I already added. But if you didn't have that, you could go press style and bold. So now I'm just going to drag it to my frame. So we can see here, here's our frame and we have the text Chatbot. So I'm going to go ahead and add order layout. Like I said before, order layout is really good for controlling spacing and padding. So I'm just going to remove all these padding numbers. The reason being is I just want to see what happens. And instead of having it on the left, we want it to be in the dead center. So I'm just going to align it into the center. And then for the padding, we would make it, let's just make it 16 and see what that size is, 52. Maybe let's make it a bit bigger, 24. See our overall design. It's probably a bit too big. Let's go back to 20. That's all right for now. So we have that and we have spacing between elements, but there's only one element. So we can just leave that 0. If it's at 8, it just probably won't do anything. So now we need our minimize button here. I can go and drag that in. And now that we have 2 elements in the order layout, the spacing between elements matter. You can see if I change that number, you can also change that number with these pink handles here. So what you want to do instead is we'll just leave it at 0. There's this feature where we can override the auto layout properties, and that's up here. When we click it, it changes that selected element to be an absolute position. So this feature only appears when there's an element within an auto layout, and that auto layout icon is those 3 lines here. I'm just going to press that. What it does is it will just assume that in this auto layout frame, there's only one element now because it doesn't count this one. And this icon has changed to indicate absolute positioning is on. So we can go ahead and we can align it to center. You can also use these align tools here. And what I want to do is I like to press the Option key to see what the spaces are. So we got 14 from the top. It's a weird number, but we can get it to match. So let's just add 344. And there we have it. We've got our perfect minimize button. So that is our header designed. And now it's time to design our footer. So it's the same thing. We're going to hit T for text and type a message. And this time we don't want it to be in the center. We want it to be on the left. So with this one, we're going to change our style to regular text. And then we're going to make it left aligned. So we're going to hit auto layout now. So we can go right click, Shift A. You can essentially add auto layout to any element, even if it's not a frame, and it will make it into a frame. So I'm just going to use the shortcut Shift A. And we've made a auto layout. So you can see here, we get our auto layout and we have our message. And by default, it's given us this nice padding around. You can see here, we have the spacing between elements is 8 and the padding is 8 and 8. So we're just going to drag it in here, see what it looks like, and we'll give it a fill. So you press plus for a fill, or these 4 dots for a style. So we'll just add gray. And we just want to make it a bit bigger. It's a bit small. So for the top, I like to use 12, and for the size, 16. So generally, we just like the sides to be a bit wider than the top and bottom, which is just optically more balanced. And again, for the spacing between elements, we can leave that at 0, even though at 8, it probably does nothing. So the rounded corners, we're going to do 12. So we did 16 for these outside ones. So we'll make it a bit tighter inside. And then we just want to add the send button here. So again, we have this frame with these 2 elements inside. So we have this element here and then the send button. So with this frame, I can go ahead and add auto layout. So what that does again is the spacing between elements. We have our padding around, and we have the area to which it is aligned. So right now it doesn't really matter. You know, I can control this. That's probably better. We want it always to be in the middle. And let's just focus on the left for now. So on this side, we'll just make it a bit tighter. We'll have it at 12 as well. And then this bottom padding, we'll have it at 12. And then the spacing between elements, let's have it at, what do we want it at? Let's just have it at 12 as well. So you can see here, we've got our shape defined. So again, so this overall frame, we have it to fill to be 390, but the height is hugged, which means it will just copy whatever size this is and then add the 12 that we've assigned it to. So what we actually want to do is we want to select this element here, and we want to make this shape not hug. So again, by having it on hug, it means it will follow these padding numbers, but we want to override it so it pushes as much as possible. So in this segment, instead of pressing hug, we can go ahead and press fill. So what it does is it takes up as much space as possible without breaking any rules. And then this text element, we would probably do the same thing, fill. And what that does is it takes up whatever space is possible. Looks a bit odd here. Maybe we want to make this one 12 as well. That looks nice and balanced. And here we have our header and footer designed. So the last thing I want to do is create our 3 middle components, which will be the chat bubbles. So I'm going to hit T for text. And I'm going to type in hello user. So we already have it on the regular style, but we can just go here, we click regular text, and we will go right click again, add auto layout. So I'm just going to hit Shift A. We can ignore this again, but I'm just going to make it 0. And we'll add a fill so we can see what that looks like. And for the fill, we'll make it this white style. And for the text, I'm holding the command key to deep select to make sure I select the exact thing I want to control. And I'm going to make this the black color. So for the padding, I'm going to have 16 horizontal padding, and the vertical padding, I'm going to have 12. The corner radiuses, I'm going to have 16. And there we have our first chat bubble. I might want to rename this chat bubble /bot. And I'm going to go right click, create component. I'm going to duplicate this to create my second one. And all I'm going to do is change the color. So again, to deep select, hold command. And instead of black, I'm going to make it white. And then instead of white, I'm going to have it black. There we have it. The reason why I created this a component is so if I want to make any changes, it will affect both of these bubbles as I'm setting them up. I'm just going to do undo. The last thing I want to do is create those prompts. And I just realized I didn't make a text style, but we can make a new one here. So I'm going to press T. And I'm going to detach this and make a new one. So I'm going to make it a bit smaller. And the line height, I'm going to make it a bit smaller. Because I want it to look a bit different to these bubbles, so it doesn't look like a chat. So I'm just going to write prompt. And I'm going to make it this blue color. So again, I'm going to hit Shift A to add auto layout. You don't have to remove this. Like I said, there's only one element, but I'm just going to make it 0. And for the purposes of this, what should I make it? Let's just make it the same for now. So we've got 16, 12. And we will see what that looks like. So no fill, we'll just make it have a stroke. So the stroke will be blue. And the corner radius will make it 16. Looks a bit big. Let's make this a bit smaller at 8. That looks nicer. So now it looks like a real pill. It has a really nice semicircle edge, which looks a bit different to this one, which is great. I'm just going to go ahead and rename this to be prompt. And I can create component. And then this one, I'm going to create component as well and call this chat bubble user. Okay. So we can go test this out here. We have our frame. I'm just going to copy these in because you never want to have your main component or your primary component within your design. So we're going to copy it and copy each one and see what that looks like. So with our frame, again, we want to add auto layout. And for the padding, we want it to have it a different padding. So we'll just make it 12, 12. And I'm happy for it to be aligned to top left, and I'm happy for it to be vertical layout. But let's just change this to be 0. We make the spacing 0 so I can use my spacer trick to control the spacing with more accuracy. But for now, we can just make it at 8. And I just want to add one more, which is the today. So we want to make this style the subtext and put that in here. again, I can click and drag any element within my auto layout frame and it will follow those rules. So now we have our components. We need to fix it up so it looks more correct. So the first one is we've got to fix up the subtext. We want it to be in the middle. So what we can do is we can make the text frame. What do we call that? Text box. Sorry, text box. We will fill the text box and we will just center the text. The second thing we want to do is that is all right. But what if we have a really long sentence? What would happen? So let's say I copy and paste this a few more times. You can see it just disappears. So what we actually want to do is we want to make sure we control it with our primary component. So every time we copy and paste it, all our instances will have the same properties. So what we want to do is we'll just create a frame here so that we can control these three elements. And for the purposes of viewing, I'm just going to make the background a color. Okay, so let's copy the same thing. We'll make it 390. Copy the order layout. So what do we have? We have a top left with spacing we said was 8. And then we have 12 and 12. So this pill, we always want it to be the size of the text. As an example, if we were to have larger text, we want the pill to grow, which is great. But all of a sudden, if it gets beyond that shape, then we don't want it to do that. So what we're trying to do is we want to restrict the size of this chat section. So there's a new feature here. So in the width, we want to go drop down and we want to add a maximum width. So we know that this section is, we need it to be 390. So let's just add a few more text. And we have 12 padding here. So if we were to go back to this pill, add max width. So we know it's 390 is the size of this frame minus the padding on each side. So minus 12, minus 12. So we can set that to be our max width. But normally when you have a chat, you might want to restrict it smaller for the left side user and smaller for the right side user aligned to the right. So for this instance, instead of 366, we're going to make the max width 300. So what that means is if it's longer than 300, it will just start a new line. However, if it's smaller, it can be whatever it needs to be to hug, which is great. So let's just go back to hello user. And we will right click, reset all changes to see that. So let me just reorder this. So the second one, how do we fix this? So we fix this by creating a frame and pushing this element to the right. So again, we want to open this and we can see this component is within this black component. So what we want to do is in this component, we want it to be fill. And instead of having this at the top left, we want it to be at the top right. So again, we have the same component here within this one, but every time you make it a component, it becomes like a frame. So this frame has auto layout and I want to force this object to be at the top right if it can. So what that means is, let's just try it in this one. It should have the same properties, which again, the max size is restricted at 300. So if I click on this, you can see the size is 300. So I'm going to go and reset my changes. The last thing I want to do is play with this prompt. So let's say you have multiple prompts. I'm going to go copy and paste. So let's say you have 5 prompts. And you want to add an order layout to control these prompts because you want it to be left to right, whereas this frame has it from up to down. So again, I'm going to select these elements. I'm just holding Shift. And I'm going to right click order layout. So what this means is we can have order layouts within order layouts, and we're now controlling this section. So what I want to do is instead of having it top to bottom, we can have it horizontal. But what that does is it forces it to be left to right, regardless of whether it goes outside of the frame. And the way that we fix this is by this wrap tool, which is really cool. So with the wrap tool, we can now change it from hug to fill. So it is filling that container, which is the size it's allowed to take, minus the padding. And whatever can fit in the first row will fit there. And if it needs to create another row, we've allowed it to create another row. So let's say we put it back to horizontal, even though the fill is on, the components will just stick outside of that bounding box. So we'll go back to wrap. You can see this row has come up, which is now controlling the gap from both the vertical aspect and the horizontal aspect. So from here, we'll make it a bit smaller. So it is a bit different to these elements. We'll just make it 6. And you can see when I changed this number, it also changed this number, but it's kind of grayed out. So what that means is this number will always copy what this number will be. So for example, if it's 12, it is also 12. We can make it a manual number by dropping down and selecting 12 or typing 12. We can make it auto, which just means it will push it to the outside of the frame. So what that means is if I drag the frame, it will just push it to the edges. So we don't really want to do that. So what we want to do is with this order layout, we'll just go back to hug. And so now we've hugged it. So essentially it's a space of 0. We can make this 6. And we just want to go back to what it was before, which is that it copies this number. So we can just click on this field and just go delete. And now when we go out of it, it's gone back to that grayed out number, which is great. So there we have it. We have all the things designed using order layout. The last thing I'll show you is how we can use those spaces. So I brought over my spacer elements that I've created before. And the goal of this is to control the spacing using these elements rather than order layouts gap figure over here, because we can only pick one number. So I'm just going to go ahead and write this to be 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and copy these elements across. I'm going to make them 8 again. We can start with that. And this is great because this is 6. I might want to have these prompts with a question. So let's say this would be a question. We might want to make this one 6. So the goal of creating these spaces is to create more connections, and we want this to be more connected. So we have it a bit smaller than the rest. And we have it like that. And let's say there is another one here. And because the bot is saying 2 lines of conversation, we might want to connect these together so it feels more connected. We'll make it 2. And what usually happens is we change these corner radiuses to be tighter so they feel more connected. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the 4th one. Go ahead and make this one 4. And then we want to control the first one. Have that one as 4. And there we have it. So the way that we hide these spaces, I can go ahead and select my component set. I press enter to go down a level, and then I can press 0 twice to change it to 0% opacity. And there we have it. Hopefully that was a comprehensive explanation as to how we use these new order layout features within our design. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. But otherwise, I hope you stay hydrated, take a break, rest your eyes, and I'll see you all next time.